Absolutely.
So Andrew, have you, when you say that it pays for it, have you been able to do a study of what the additional costs, the additional hospitalization, blah, 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 any of those things? Have you done that?
Yes, we're currently working on a study to get an exact number here, but from all the research that we've done so far, looking at the productivity costs, the shortage costs, and as well as just the worst patient outcomes, whether it's delayed care, rationed care, or getting substandard treatment, the costs vastly outweigh. And so we're currently in the process of making a study to get an exact number on this, but it is clear already that the long-term cost is much, much more savings than it would be by paying the marginally more rates in the beginning. And then on top of that, I'll add for this buyer side for the hospital, because we don't have this mandatory country of origin labeling, the hospitals themselves often don't know what the supply chain risks are.
Even if they wanted to do the right thing.
Exactly, especially when it comes back to the API. And so because they have so little visibility into the quality side, they have to go for the price. And that inevitably pushes things more offshore.
And I can tell you that where it really does pay off is for the patient. So there was one study that looked at one particular shortage of a drug, and the fact that more patients ended up dying of septic shock because the alternative was not available. And when you looked at the cost of life and you calculated the number of patients that died, that single shortage cost over $13 billion.
Right, but the hospital doesn't pay that cost.
And the hospital does not pay that cost. There's a big gap between the.
It's worse.
That's
you
right.
You pay the hospital.
The worst is that if we don't pay for results like we should, we should pay different. Like if somebody doesn't do fix your car right, you don't pay. Mm-hmm. But every healthcare provider thinks, well, you still have to pay. Why?
Right. So the problem is you're talking about dynamic scoring, which is not how hospitals balance their budgets. So when you do your analysis, you say it's only costing them $60,000 a year because they're not obligated to factor in all the cost and harm caused to the patient or to society or to any other stakeholder outside of their bottom line. So that's the problem. Like the costs are spread to us, the profits are given to the provider. And so when they're doing their cost-based analysis, they're saying, well, we're going to go with the cheaper drug. The DoD is the same. So every purchaser in the system today has multiple factors, but cost is almost always the factor. And I believe—
And it's the decision today. Decisions today, not the long-term costs.
Correct. No one does dynamic scoring. No one actually wants to bear the full brunt of the cost. So I think part of this committee's job is to really do all the pieces that you've all suggested. Country of origin labeling, making sure we know the quality up front, have a incentive, as you say, to do the quality testing. Make sure that the cost, as you've decided, Andrew, is documented to the world, to the patient, to the United States. And then to the other piece of national security, that's not even calculable. You can't calculate what will happen if we're at war, the risk. If we're at war with China and you can't get antibiotics into this country and how many millions of people die, that's the cost of that is trillions of dollars. It's incomprehensible. And so the truth is this is a reason why no one's done this work before, because the cost is incalculable. So I'm really excited about the work this committee's doing, and I think it's important.
So it seems like if you go through the process to make movement, the easiest thing is, because they report to us, is DoD and VA, right? If they started buying based on buying American, that would move the needle. Right, that would move it the fastest. The other is, why doesn't, we talk about these violations, the FDA or the FDA knowing that we only have one supplier. Why aren't they doing something
in regards to diversifying?
Yeah, why wouldn't they? If they're responsible for us staying safe, right?
Well, their mandate is to ensure that manufacturers comply with CGMP manufacturing practices, and that before they even produce those medicines, that they've been vetted through analysis of them. So going beyond is to managing the supply chain itself and saying how many, that would be outside their bounds in regards to what they would work on. And I would also say that, sorry, Marta, just one line. I would also say that strategy also does something very different as well. It's a strategy of redirecting as opposed to countering, right? As opposed to countering and trying to counter India and counter China, which will be very resourceful, right? Being able to start with redirecting manufacture through procurement, US-based requirements, US-based prioritization, which, by the way, we're the only nation that does not prioritize their domestic manufacturing source over foreign. So the ability to do that is a far more higher probability of success because you're redirecting, you're not countering, which is difficult.
Did you want to say something? Okay. Okay, so we can, so just off the top of our head, we can think about the VA, DOD. We should have some sort of map, even if we start, like you said, you can't start big, you should, even if we start small. And then we should have higher expectations for all of our buyers.
And demand transparency.
I definitely
We can
think.
require transparency.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I got it.
We should require transparency. We should require labeling. We should require information. And then that also can move a market because you can shame people into not, like, if they're not caring where their drugs are coming from and they're not caring about the outcome to their patients, you can shame them into better participation. And then if the DOD and the VA can be the standard bearer or the hallmark of success and show that long-term their costs aren't going skyrocketing high, they can then make the case you should do these long-term investments, get the quality drugs you need, and then pushing governors and pushing presidents to invest domestically. Because the other point you all raised up is that most of our adversaries and most of our competitors, they do domestic investment. Every company in China is wholly owned by China. They will do all the baseline investments. So we can create an investment fund that actually invests in domestic production to incentivize it. And even if we don't want to create a pot of money, we certainly can create massive tax incentives. So there's many ways to create carrots.
Well, and what if Tony said is right, there's a 3-year payback. I mean, you don't have to invest a dime.
Especially if you're using existing facilities, and that's the key.
And we have, at least short term, we have plenty of capacity.
We have over 30 billion doses of
And
idle
you can-
capacity.
And also you can use the Defense Production Act to require us to use that capacity. So
That's
once
correct.
we map capacity, if you've already done that, we can publish that to say we will then ask the DOD and the VA and the president to ask each of these manufacturers to use all their capacity to begin to ramp up domestic production of the top 10 required generic drugs for our safety and survival.
And you have facilities that are highly experienced at producing these medicines. So they should be leveraged first and foremost because they're experts in these areas, like the companies that Tony brought up, before even starting up new facilities. We will, ideally, hopefully, we'll be able to open new facilities, but leveraging the incredible experience we already have in this industrial manufacturing base that is elite, and being able to provide them new technologies, that's where the investment, I believe, is the greatest place. Because it's about investing and allowing for sustainable independence by these manufacturers. We don't want the government to continue to have to invest in them. Modernize their facility, leverage their expertise, let them invest themselves now that there's a market, and allow them to be sustainable long-term economically to produce these medicines. And you've created the demand. So demand, investment in modernization so they can compete. So long term, we don't have to revisit this and have to continue to fund it. The industries themselves can do it.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you,
go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman.
Can I comment on transparency? Because I think it's really, really critical. So the way I think about transparency is who needs what information and what are they going to do with it? And I think it's really, really critical to ask that question because some transparency for the sake of transparency is not going to get you anywhere. And transparency can actually sometimes backfire. And so I am a very big proponent about the government having transparency. This is how you decide what to prioritize, where to invest. This is why it's important for FDA to know that manufacturers might have a problem and this buys them time. But for example, hospitals really want an early warning system of shortages. But you know what that means? That means that they basically have a sign to stockpile really early, and then FDA actually has much less time to try to fix the problem. So it's not always that way. Where I get really nervous is transparency to consumers. And I'll tell you why. And I actually have a story very similar to Peter Baker's story, and it actually involves my mother, if I would be allowed to share this story. So, and I've never shared it publicly. My mother was diagnosed with cancer in early 2020, and she needed to get radiation and chemotherapy. And it was going to be oral chemotherapy. And it was a 60-day supply of a pill. And it was going to be an old generic. And knowing what I know, I got very nervous. And I basically thought, if my mom doesn't respond well to this therapy, I will never forgive myself, because what if that product was not made to specification? So I actually have access to a lot of information, and I looked at who the manufacturer is for this NDC, and I looked, where it might be manufactured and what are the alternatives. And, you would think that I would be knowing, and it was really difficult for me, and I have access to really top information. And you would think that I would be the first person to say we need to fix it. But you know what I learned from this experience is the complete opposite, because of what happened next. I went to one pharmacy and I said, can you dispense me this NDC? They said, no, we don't do special orders. I went to another pharmacy, I got the same answer. Pharmacies are reimbursed in exactly the same way. It's a low business margin, and you have one option when you go to a pharmacy. Unless we were to fix how pharmacies are reimbursed and how pharmacies stock, the patient only has one choice: to pick it up or not pick it up. This is not like going to a store where you have 5 shirts and you get to choose one. They don't have a choice. So by giving this information to consumers, where there's absolutely no incentive for a pharmacy to do anything about it and respond it, that is a recipe for a lot of non-adherence. And so yes, I would prefer to choose the non-Chinese drug over a Chinese drug, but at a pharmacy, I'm not going to have that option. So it's really, really, really important that we either fix that problem or look for solutions elsewhere.
Let me give you my response. I really believe in transparency, and I'll give you a story. So, so I've run a bunch of companies, and you know what every employee wants? They want every hospital in the network. That means you get no discounts, right? And so the reality is, if I had 2 plans, and everybody's included in a plan that's cheaper with just one hospital, include a smaller network. Some people would pick one because they know it, but some people would pick a more expensive. I actually really believe that that people they'll look at it and look, is it going to be perfect? No, people buy ugly sweaters sometimes. But I believe over time it will force whoever the pharmacy is. If I walked in and I had one and it said, I'd start bugging them. And we see it now. We see it with people buying America. You can even get on Amazon, which still doesn't disclose all country of origin, but you go to Amazon now and they have sections. And I can tell you, I've talked to people that make it in America. They put the label on Made in America, their revenues go up. So I believe I agree with you. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be perfect. The information never is perfect. But if we do it all, it will force people to change. They will change. I've seen it in too many businesses. So, do you want to add anything?
No.
Okay. I want to thank everybody for being here today and participating. Look forward to continuing to work with members across the aisle and down the dais. If any senator has additional questions for the witnesses or statements to be added, the hearing record will be open until next Wednesday at 5 p.m. I want to thank each of you for being here. And if you have any suggestions for either one of us going forward, we are going to get this fixed. Thank you.